Hey y'all, it's Jasmine Jones, licensed clinical social worker, and you are now tuned into Black Girl Therapists in the Wild. And today we are talking about anti blackness and its effects on mental health. So, how can anti blackness affect your mental health? First and foremost, it can leave you as the odd person out, not feeling like you belong, from childhood. I have a former classmate that I went to grad school with, and they were on Facebook talking about how they have to give their 7-year-old child the talk about racism. And my talk about racism was, I think me and my mom sat down and watched all of the whole Roots miniseries. And that was my talk, and it made it really easy to understand who I was and who everybody else was and why they treated us different. So you always feel like you're the odd person out, like you're different, like there's something off about you that will not be accepted by most people in this world. Another reason I like to use anti-blackness, because it's all over the world when it comes to people that are of African descent. Different cultures in different countries don't like black people. So even when you're traveling around the world, you have to have a green book for international travel to know where you can go where you will feel safe and where you can go where you won't be safe, and I think only black people have that, and maybe LGBTQ. Let's see, women. Depending on some countries, and I think it depends on what you're wearing in some countries as a woman. But when it comes to black folks, it's very difficult to know if you can travel somewhere and feel safe, or if you're going to travel somewhere and be assaulted or disappear or have acid thrown on you. I think at one point I refused to travel to France because I heard a few stories about French people just walking up to, African folks that were migrants there and pouring acid on them. So you're not just the odd person out in the particular country that you grew up in. You're also the odd person out all across the world. That can lead to, not being able to cultivate an individual self, learning who you are as a person. During our preteen and teenage years, that is the time where we start to develop ourselves, our identities. And for a lot of black people, we don't necessarily develop ourselves just in this world, but how we are seen as black people. So your identity becomes this whole anti-black thing too. Like, I have to dress a certain way and be a certain way and talk a certain way, and then not even know for sure if that will be enough. So you're constantly hyper vigilant and on edge about how you present yourself amongst different types of people. And that can cause a lot of anxiety and a lot of depression, circling around not being good enough and being the odd person out, as well as being anxious, trying to fit yourself into this box that society wants you to fit in. Now you have depression and anxiety. And then on top of that, you can add trauma to that if you've experienced microaggressions, covert racism, overt racism, police brutality. Now, you're looking over your shoulder every time you see a police officer. You're not sure how to respond. You're having, I have a lot of clients that have panic attacks around police officers, because they don't know what's going to happen, or if that's going to be the nice police officer that day, or if that's going to be the police officer that has problems and wants to have a problem with them. So it can be very scary. It can be very scary, and it can leave you traumatized. You can have intrusive memories. You can have flashbacks. And don't let this happen when you're around a police officer, where you just lose control of your mental health and you don't know what to do because you're so anxious and overwhelmed and you don't know what's going to happen. So being a black person can be very scary. You're the odd person out. You have trouble forming an individual identity apart from anti-blackness. And then you have trauma that leaves you hypervigilant and scared all the time. So these things can develop into, you seeing black folks that lash out and seem angry all the time. That's that seem like, they need to fit in this box, so they're always on, they're always happy and cheerful and all these other things. um you just see various different types of mental health issues in the black community. Suicide rates tend to be pretty high, among black men especially. A lot of times we can develop a defeatist ideal where we feel like we're not going to live to see tomorrow. So, why try? Why create something? Why be something more in this world if nobody cares? I mean, if you think of somebody that's abused by their parents, at some point, because their parents didn't love them, they feel like they are not lovable by anyone. Well, when you're black and the whole world is telling you there's something wrong with you and they're trying to kill you and all this other stuff, well, you end up believing that you're not worth anything, so you kind of throw your life away. You don't believe you're smart enough. There's a lot of black children in school who have teachers that will put them down and say that they're not going to make it to college and they're not going to do this, that, and the other, making them feel stupid and all these other things, which, because they're kids, they believe this and then they take this on into adulthood, not believing that they're capable of doing much more than, what gang members are doing on the streets, are, getting into a life of crime or getting into a life where they feel like there's family, basically. So when you feel like you're not good enough, you go wherever it feels like somebody will care. And a lot of these times it can be in a position where you're doing something illegal or you're a part of a group of people that are doing something illegal and things like that. If you think of post-traumatic slave disorder and how trauma can be passed down through families, through your genes, through epigenetics, well, that also goes into how black people form a view of themselves. You see one parent who has all of these issues when going through conflicts, and so what happens is that how your parents deal with the conflicts is how you're going to deal with the conflicts. So it's all of these things. It's feeling like the odd person out. It's going through random traumas, not being able to develop your individual self, not feeling like you have any support system in society. So going into groups or gangs or committing yourself to a life of crime to feel like you fit in somewhere. And then we have cycles of trauma in families and how your parents can traumatize you based on them not working through their traumas. So when it comes to mental health, black people run the gamut just because we have to basically figure it out for ourselves. And that's kind of how it's been since slavery days. We have to figure it out for ourselves. We can't trust in society to be there for us a lot of the time. So when I'm working with my black clients and, they're discussing how they've gone through anti-blackness and they've experienced, being pushed out and pushed aside and looked down on, and microaggressions, and not being able to talk about the microaggressions because it just toes the line sometimes, where if you talk about it, then it means that, oh, well, you're being angry. So see, you're seen as these stereotypes that are made up about you in society as well. So that goes into forming your own identity. So you can't form your own identity. You have to take the identity that society has formed for you. And you can never be a real person. You're just a caricature to other people. And when I talk to them, the first thing we talk about is what do you like about yourself individually, separate from what you've been told throughout your whole life? What do you enjoy about yourself? What makes you happy? What makes you, and a lot of times, my clients will say things like, reading, eating, talking to their friends, all the normal things that human beings like to do that makes them happy, that makes them like themselves, doing art, family, things like that. And then I'm like, okay, so you cherish those things that make you happy. How can you set boundaries around them so that no one else can come in and make you feel unhappy and make you forget who you are. And then we work on setting boundaries, learning how to say no, learning how to tell somebody to stop when they're trying to touch your hair or put you down or make you feel like you're an angry black person when in reality you're just saying how you feel and not being made to feel bad for saying how you feel. We set boundaries, and then we surround ourselves by people that will, accept these boundaries in us, will respect our boundaries basically, and love us and care for us. And they show it to us consistently. So looking at the consistent behaviors and people around us. So even let's say you can't necessarily control your coworkers at your job, but you know that you have an army of friends and family behind you that won't leave you behind and will hold you up when you feel like the world is too much. Once we talk about boundaries, then we talk about how can you enjoy your life regardless of how others try to push you down. So, what self-care activities do you do? What do you do to make yourself feel better when you get upset? What do you do to make yourself, to not shame yourself and acknowledge your emotions? How do you acknowledge your emotions? Because the goal is to acknowledge the fact that something hurt your feelings. The goal is not be in denial about the fact that something made you feel bad or something was wrong to you. And the goal is that you can eventually start to, express how you feel, and that can be a self-care thing as well. So you have this toolkit. You start to develop this toolkit of things that you can use when you're out in the world to help you get through negative situations, because we can't control others. We can only control ourselves. So yes, you decided what you like about yourself. You've set boundaries. You've gathered an army of folks around you that will love and support you no matter what. But we can't control others. We can't control people. So that's where our emotional toolkit comes in. Our emotional toolkit is basically full of all the self-care things that we do to help us overcome negative moments when we're out in the world or even when we're home. Giving yourself an activity to look forward to when you get home from work is something that can be in your emotional toolkit. I'm going to watch the rest of the Netflix show that I was watching, or I'm going to take a bubble bath, or I'm going to have a picnic in the middle of my living room, So activities that you can do. I'm going to finish reading this book. I'm going to call my friend. I'm going to have, sleep over one of my best friends or something like that. I don't know. Whatever you feel is in need to be in your emotional toolkit. And then finally, forming a goal. What is the goal that you have for your life? What is your goal as far as your career? If there is racism in your career path, how can you form your own career path so that you can limit as much racist microaggressions and things like that as possible? I have formed my own business. I have my own private practice, so I feel more in control of who comes into my life in almost every arena, whether it's personal, whether it's, socially, like out in the world, and career-wise. So when it comes to your goals, how can you form your life in a way that is going to grow who you are and give you more control of who has access to you and who has access to, be around you and things like that. Lastly, sharing what you've learned. That was, I said finally before, but this is the last one. Sharing what you've learned, even if that means just sharing it with your family, sharing it with your friends, sharing it, or you can get on a bigger platform and share it with others, or even just share it with your children. If you choose to have children, share it with your partner, how you learn to love yourself, the boundaries that you set, the coping skills that you've set to deal with negativity, and the goals that you have for yourself, and teaching that to other people. And that's how we start breaking these cycles of trauma, is spreading the love around, spreading the self-care, spreading the mental health awareness around, and not shaming yourself and teaching others not to shame themselves for the fact that they've experienced trauma. And since they've experienced trauma, it's going to be painful and it's going to be a difficult process to overcome that trauma, basically. And so it takes time, it takes practice, and it starts with you, you know? It starts with you recognizing that you have been hurt, that you have been hurt throughout the years because of anti-Blackness, that the world has shown us that how they feel about us for centuries. And it's going to take time, but you can do it. You can overcome the illness, the pandemic of anti-Blackness by loving yourself and allowing yourself to grow away from it, and teaching others how to love themselves and allow themselves to grow away from it. Once you stop, allowing negativity into your life, the negativity has to figure it out because you're not paying attention to it anymore. You're paying attention to your happiness and to things that make you feel good, and you're not paying attention to the negative anti-Black rhetoric in this world. And so they have to figure out their own lives, and they have to figure out their own pain. They have to figure out why they are so hateful, So yeah, that is my video for today. I'm calling these like self-help videos or random mental health videos or something. I try to post one with my insecure videos just so I can have something that's mental health along with it. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I will talk to you all later. Later days.